Okay, so last week we went through the first three tokens, which are sort of the broader ideas. We went through the directions and the elements. And one of the important themes that we also talked about last week was to think about symbols, because of course all of these are based on symbols, but regardless of what system you're looking in, sort of the key thing to keep in your mind is that quote about, I think it was a Joseph Campbell quote about how symbols can root you and ground you in a situation, which is good. And then ideally it should push you and catapult you then past the situation and out of that into the more realms of thinking and stretching your ways of thinking and seeing the world around you. And so everything that you address when you hit symbols, first, yes, it can connect us to an actual thing. So for example, if we do a tarot reading and we are thinking about moving, or you're doing a question on moving and you get the Six of Swords, which is the actual card for movement, or if you're a Lenormand person and you get the ship card, or the stork card, which is literally a movement card. So first our brain can go to, oh yeah, there's that literal connection that I can make with that symbol to something concrete, like actually moving. And then it can also then catapult you past a physical thing of moving to really think about movement in a larger sense of somebody being stuck and feeling like they need to move forward, which isn't a physical moving, but it is more mental moving. So we talked about the different ways that symbols can work, especially in the case of, obviously in this case, in any of my classes, we're talking about being able to use those symbols in a way that we do readings. So we talked about that. So today we're going to be moving to the energy points. And again, if you, with your guidebook, make sure that you read the sections, because we're not going to go through these one by one, except for perhaps in the very last class we might do a kind of quick run through of them all. But we're not trying to reinvent the wheel of, you already have the guidebook. We're kind of looking at them in a larger context, which you don't get in the guidebook. So for this particular section, you'll want to read from 29 to 34. So that is a whole section on energy suits, because that of course goes into each one of the tokens. So when we're looking at this section, which is the energy points, there's two parts to this section, right? It is the actual energy points, but then it is also interactions with energy. So ways that energy can be blocked, can be shook up, can be abdicated and given over, that type of thing, which we'll look at the second part. But the main part of this section is related to energy points. Now, obviously, I think that most people, especially in the West now, are really comfortable with, or at least aware of, the chakra system. The chakra system is interesting. Historically, there was a writer who went under Arthur Avalon, but his real name was Sir John Woodruff. And he wrote a book, and I can't remember the title of the book at the moment. I can get it if somebody wants it. I can email it to you. But he wrote a book about, like, you know, exposing the secrets of the East, mostly from India, though I think there was some Chinese secrets, like, that he was bringing to the West, so to speak. And so he talks about 6 chakras, and actually then does talk about the crown chakra, but he even says in the book that it's not an actual chakra point, but for whatever reason, people in the West kind of took that system on as being 7 chakra points and ran with it, right? So we have all kinds, really everything that you can see generally, especially in the West, or any books on chakras and things like that that are written by Westerners, are generally going to have the 7 chakras. Sometimes there are 9 where they add an extra one in the root and an extra one above the crown. But in India, I think originally there were 6, and they weren't even located quite exactly the way that we see them now as being located. But then even within in India, there were various ways in which they saw the energy points. All from 6, generally from 6 to 8, there were shifts, and exactly where they were a little bit shifted up and down. So there's been different, even within the actual culture, that chakra, as that term came through, there are always going to be variations across time. But India is actually not by far the only place that uses the idea of there being energy points within the body, and the way that energy interacts with each other. Of course, we think of all to do with Chinese medicine, probably same timing, if not maybe even before Hinduism and before the chakras. I can't remember the date that they first saw reading about chakras, but the idea of pressure points, acupressure points, having, yes, this isn't, sorry, Chris, yeah, this, I didn't put this in the handout. I probably should have. I can send you an extra page for it because I can just copy it over. This is what what you see in this picture are we in the West now especially do associate the chakra points with crystals. We associate it with colors, and some of those associations are online with the way that somebody in India would align them, sometimes not. So I have for a couple years, 8 times a year. So there are, as we talked about, well, we'll talk about more when we get to the seasons, there are, when you follow the sun, there are 8 points of the year that for some pagan religions use, like Wicca, I believe, uses the festivals. And there are other people that are not Wiccan that also follow the festivals around the year, that the 8 major festivals at the solstices, the equinoxes, and the cross quarters. But even seasonally, again, as we talked about last week, I did grow up in and live in a climate that is fully seasonal. So we experience all 4 seasons, but there are not just 4 seasonal points, there are 8 seasonal points. And so like we talked about, if you think in my climate, the beginning of fall is very different energy, and climate, the world outside looks very different than the end of fall, when leaves are falling and becoming bare, where at the beginning of fall is all the harvest festivals bringing the harvest in, the leaves are vibrant and turning colors. So it's different energies between just saying fall doesn't encompass all the changes, whereas if you have 2 points, it makes a lot more sense. But astrologically, there are 8 points. So you have, again, the cross quarters, the solstices, and the equinoxes forming 8 points. So at each one of those points, I will go through a week with each one of those crystals that you see on the picture there, pull a card or something with it, and sort of tap into, okay, what's going on at this point, what's going on at that point, leading up to the cross quarter or the equinox or the solstice. So that's kind of the crystals that I use. But we do in the West really associate the 7 points. So I did want to make sure that the 7 points were there, because that is something that a lot of people do work with. But again, and there are so many different cultures that work with energy points. We talked about the amazing just mapping that the Chinese people did of the electrical meridians and lines and points across the entire human body. In Buddhism, there are wheels, there are 4 wheels. There are pressure points as well in Japanese medical systems. There are energy centers in Korean systems. Africa, across the different, Egypt talks about energy points. I know Yoruba, I believe Miss Osset would know better than me, but that did pop up as well. And there being that concept of internal energy points. Really, obviously Kabbalah with the Jewish system there talks about energy points. There are quite a few different North American tribes or First Nations people that talk about an internal energy points as well. And so it's always, it's one of those things I always say where there's smoke, there's fire, right? When you have so many different cultures who talk about energy points and the way that energy moves and flows within the body, using obviously with say acupressure or acupuncture, the idea is that if you're having pain or sickness in some way or another, being able to relieve pressure points can actually help get the flow of energy moving again and cause you to be a healthier human being. Kind of treating the whole body versus treating really specific symptoms. So it's so interesting to see if you do a deep, I should have put, there's this lady who had done a book, I don't know how, it's a Llewellyn book, and it is on the chakra system. However, she does go through quite a bit of this type of thing about all of the different cultures who do have some concept of there being energy points within the body. So because of that, we do have what we're looking at here on the screen, which is the 7 could relate to the chakras if you want them to relate to the chakras, because that's what a lot of people work with. For myself, we're going to talk a bit about the 3 cauldrons. Now, 1 or 2 of you, I think, have taken my OM class, and so might have a little bit of idea about this. But the cosmology, I think we talked a little bit last week about the Celtic cosmology, the way that the Celtic people, as well as the Norse cosmology or worldview, because those 2 things, remember, while we think about Norse and runes and these type of thing over here, and then we think about the Celts as over here in like Ireland, that's not actually the case, right? The Norse people and the Celtic people, especially the Celtic people, are all across Europe. And people were moving and shifting and intermingling. And so you do see a lot of intermingling of ideas and thoughts, which is really beautiful. So while you might think, okay, over here with the Celts, there is the Oghams, and over here with the Norse people, there is the runic alphabet. And their ideas are like separate, and there's this big wall between them. There's a lot of exchange of ideas, and as there were exchange of people through slavery, through wife stealing, where they would raid and get a bunch of women and pull them back over. And again, the Celts were doing it, the Vikings were doing it. So there's a lot of movements of thoughts and ideas, and you see that reflected in the mythologies and the way they see the world. The problem that we have with, and we talk about this a lot in the OM class, because the problem with Celtic, not just the mythologies, but trying to figure out the way that Celtic people viewed the world and saw the world, is one of the more problematic natures of mythology, because there was an almost complete eradication of actual documentation or writings or anything of that nature that doesn't come through the lens of the Catholic Church. Because when they came over into Ireland and those areas, they pretty much destroyed everything and rewrote things, and they were trying to preserve the Celtic history, but it's all done through obviously the lens of the monks and the scribes, and so everything has got to be filtered through that particular lens, and it makes it really problematic for reconstructionists. So if you are practicing spiritual pathways today that connect you to, say, Celtic roots or even Nordic roots, although we have more that's left Nordic wise, or say Greek roots, or with that we're going to have a lot of more actual paper trail there, right? You always have to do a bit of reconstruction. So you'll see Celtic Reconstructionist or as a spiritual path, and that means that what you do is you don't have, say, a Bible, or you don't have a ultimate text that says this is everything that these particular people thought or believed about something, and this is how they used the OMs exactly, or this is how they use the runes exactly. We don't have that. Some because it's old enough where paper things aren't going to still exist. some because there are shifts in political powers that then again rewrite the history. They always say history goes to the winner, right? And so you have to take pieces of things and try to reconstruct what the people may have thought or how the people may have used a particular thing. And so no matter what, you're not going to ever be practicing or doing something the exact same way that somebody was doing it in 200 CE in Ireland, right? You're not going to be able to do that because there's a lot of guesswork that is involved. But one of the interesting things about the Three Cauldrons is it's an actual manuscript, which is very few of them in the Celtic framework, that was translated, but it was translated from, we know the language, the Old Irish that was used for it, and they know the time frame of it. So it's one of those pieces that is sort of the holy grail in the fact that we get a glimpse a little bit more cleanly into the ways in which they saw the world that we've had to kind of guess in other formats. Oops, my thing's not, there we go. So this manuscript is called The Cauldron of Poesy, and I put on your handout, there is a website. When I send the final link to this, I will put the actual link so you can click on it because it's right here, and I think it's in your handout, but that way you don't have to type it all out. I'll put it where you can link on it because there aren't a lot of English translations of the Cauldron of Poesy manuscript. So the manuscript that we have is actually a 16th century, so that means 1500s. But the original text of the poem, because of the format of Irish that it was in, would be more of the 7th century, which is going to be the 600s. And so that's really exciting because, again, we don't have a lot that are actual manuscripts like that. But she, I don't know, this is a book called Ogham Weaving the Word Wisdom. This is one of my favorite Ogham books by Erin Rowan Laurie. She does a full translation of it, which is where she has it up on her website. So I will put the link to that so that you can read. She actually has a translation that you can read. The only other place, I don't think I brought that book, oh no, it's over there. Caitlin and John Matthews have an encyclopedia of Celtic wisdom, and that's not really a book on talking about Celtic, well, it does talk about Celtic wisdom, but it actually is taking this, it's like a source book. It's where you can get sort of the manuscripts, any of the things that we do have, you're having the actual text there to work with. And Caitlin Matthews does a translation of the Cauldron of Poesy as well in that book. And there's a couple other people who translated it. I had a copy of it back in the 90s. I have absolutely no idea who translated. I can't give any, appropriation to who did the translating because it was way too long ago when you were getting stuff off of news group lists, and I have no clue who translated it. And I also had bumped into it in college for I think it was in probably medieval literature, because that would have been the time frame probably that it was anyways. I bumped into it, but I don't know what, I didn't use that or copy that in because I don't know who did the translation of it. So as far as I'm aware, right here and now, those are the two best places to get an actual translation. But again, Miss Lori, she does put the whole translation as well as some notes about how what the different things might mean. She does sort of the notes as well at the end. So the first part of the website is an actual translation of the different parts of the text, and then she does go in to talk about it, and she's got it up on her website, so you can take a look at that. But in that, the idea is that we are all born with three cauldrons. within ourselves. And so this does tie to some degrees with the three wells. If you know about Norse mythology, there are three wells on the tree of life, and so on the world tree. And so they do tie in a little bit together. You do have the well of weird, or also the well of fate. You have the well of memory and wisdom on the world tree, and then you have the well on the world tree in which all of the rivers of the world, all the waters of the world come from. So it's the idea of the source where everything is flowing from and going out into the rest of the tree. And so you can kind of relate the cauldrons and although you don't hear a lot with Norse mythology that I'm aware of. I know more about Celtic mythology than Norse, of bringing that into an internal sense. The wells seem more of an external, whereas the cauldrons in Celtic, in the Cauldron of Poesy poem or manuscript, is very directly speaking about internal energy points on the inside there. So while they can relate, and I'll show how they relate, it's not an exact match there. So I'm going to move this down here. Now you do have all this text, so I'm not going to read through all of this again. My point of this isn't so much to go back over what you already have, but just to see how these things can relate and how we can, what's the cosmology of the journey tokens, basically. And a big part of that is to do with the cauldrons, because I relate the energy points to the cauldrons. So the first of the cauldron, and you're going to start at the bottom and move your way up. You'll see a graphic in a minute here, or it's actually already in your handouts. Excuse me. You're going to have if you look at these images here of the cauldrons, you can sometimes have your cauldrons born upright, and sometimes your cauldrons you're born with them flipped to the side, or sometimes they can be completely turned over. Now, the language of this poem and the manuscript, it's not all poetry, but there's a poetic pieces and then there's manuscript writing about it, is definitely relating to inspiration. It's definitely talking about poets and those people who are inspired, versus people that maybe have to work a little bit harder at it. And so, but the cauldrons, it talks about how the cauldrons can actually shift and move throughout your lifetime. And so when we talk about the cauldron of warming, this is where our physical health is. This can fall over on its side if our physical health isn't very good. And it provides the energy that's going to push upward to the next tier. So it's a three-tiered section. And so the energy that's down here in the belly, in terms of the chakras you're looking at, or in terms of the journey tokens that relate to the chakras, you're looking at the fiery ones, the will, the passion ones that are going to fire up and warm and heat up the cauldron that's above it. But it does have to do with your health. Everybody is born with this cauldron upright, but the movement that it can do is fall over to the side and spill your energy out when you're not in good health, when you're just physically not in your best fitness. It's not so much emotional bad, because it's in the next one. It's more to do with your actual physical health. So that if you aren't at your best, if you're sick, if you're not eating healthy, if you're not exercising, all those kinds of things, the cauldron can fall over. And so in your energy, instead of heating and running your body at optimal efficiency, is now wasting energy. It's spilling out energy, and you're not going to be as strong and you're not going to be as healthy, which obviously I think makes sense to how we see things. Then we have the cauldron of motion, and this is the cauldron that moves the most. This is related to the heart. This is related, I'll show you that in a minute. For right now, we'll just talk about the cauldrons. But this, in a normal person, which they would have considered just an average person, it's born already sideways. And somebody who is a great poet, somebody who is born with the, you know, high levels of inspiration and high levels of intellect, this is actually going to be already upright, ready to receive the wisdom from the gods or from the above to come and pour into the cauldron to be able to be a great bard or a great poet of some sort. This cauldron is the one that moves the most. It's also the one that they talk the most about, because this cauldron can be moved from empty or face down to upright or upright, either direction at 360 degrees around. And it's based off of great joys and great sorrows. So great joys can both turn the cauldron upright, but great sorrows and great difficulties can also turn the cauldron upright, because it can be a way of inspiration. You know, poets, and think about musicians and poets and painters, artists of all different, writers. A lot of the great composers and great artists come from a place of great sorrow as well. Like, you can use sorrow to inspire. Just as much as you can use joy to inspire. And it's interesting because they even talk about what are the sorrows. So the sorrows that can, in the manuscript, the sorrows that can turn your cauldron upright or down, either way, are longing, grief, jealousy, and hard travel, which they tend to translate as being like going on a pilgrimage, or being willing to push yourself to climb that mountain or to get out there and do something that can turn the cauldron. And the joys are broken into two categories: human joys and divine joys. So the divine joys, of course, are God blessing you, or the different gods in Celtic pantheon giving you blessings, that type of thing. Whereas the human ones are broken into sex, being able to turn your cauldron, physical health, joy at doing your work well. So this idea of being prosperous, because whatever your work is, you're putting your best work into what you're trying to accomplish, and having success in general are joys there. Those are the four joys. The physical things that you get from prosperity, the joy of just succeeding and doing what you're doing, and then sexual delight can also turn your cauldron. But again, we have they like literally are listing how these energy points can turn and what can turn them. And the idea that's different about the Celtic ideas of the energy points is that they don't really see, if you read the whole manuscript, they don't really see just joy, where a lot of things kind of push towards always being happy, or always that the important shifts and changes in life are those happy moments. There was a real strong understanding that great sorrows and difficulties also can not just have a negative effect of turning your cauldron upside down, but can actually take something, can wake you up. You can go from a place in which your cauldron is upside down, you're not really interacting with the world, you're just kind of going through the motions, and a traumatic, sorrowful, hard event can cause you to wake, you know, something that we know now can cause you to sort of wake up and see the world, understand that life is short, understand that you know, the sky is really blue and the trees are amazing, and you start to see the world differently, and you can be woke up even from sorrow, and just as much as you can from joy. And so there's a real interesting thing that you don't often see, where it's usually you'll see a lot talking about the joys and doing happy things to get your energy up and those types of things, which is true, and they do talk about that, obviously, but they do have a strong understanding that it's both of those things, that we're not trying to run from sorrow or joy, but you need to lean into them. So that's the cauldron of motion. And then the cauldron of wisdom is of course, again, upside down, when you're born upside down, if you're just a normal everyday person, if you're a great poet or a great intellectual person, yours might be born with your cauldron upright, and it's taking on all of the energy from the gods, all the energy from the higher realms, so that that can then fill up your cauldron, spill down into the ones below. So it's this process of starting with the warming and the energy moving up, just like you think about the Kundalini and this. I'm not a chakra expert, but that motion of coming from the very root and the base and spiraling upward. You still have that same movement with the three cauldrons, and then that all that you're taking in from the gods and from the universe then can spill down and fill the cauldrons from above as well. So there's a flow of going up and coming back down in the energy points, which is really cool. Yes. Well, overboiled, but in a more like an overfilled pot. The overboiled might be the warming one at the bottom, Mr. Jones. So it's like an overfill. So your cup runneth over, as it would say in the Bible. Like when you're filling up this cup with from divine gifts, it just starts to spill over, and then it affects the other two in a positive way. It can affect those cauldrons below it. So you're wide open. Whereas if your cauldron's upside down and you're getting, gifts from the gods, or you're getting gifts from the universe, or, God's sending you blessings, but your cauldron's upside down, there's nothing to fill, right? It's just kind of a runoff, and you're not really getting anything out of it. And so you really, the purpose is to get your cauldron, obviously that top cauldron upright, so that when you are getting inspiration and you're getting ideas and you're I'm going to make this new invention, and I'm going to write this poem, or I'm going to paint this painting, or whatever. They were very much concerned about poetry for sure in the manuscript, but the idea is that the inspiration is now coming into a cauldron that is upright and ready to be filled. Whereas if it's flipped upside down, it's just kind of running off of a brick wall. It's not going to do you any good. So wanting to get that cauldron upright. And so you do, and as I note here, the most of the movement that is happening is in that second cauldron. But there is a line that talks about the four sorrows, specifically we're talking about the sorrows, are endured internally, turning the cauldrons, although the cause is from the outside. So understanding that the cause of the sorrow can be outward. It's an internal energy that is happening, and all of the calls. So we know that while the one manuscript that we have describes the cauldron of motion turning the most, all of the cauldrons can be turned and moved. So kind of similar, I think, to especially the Buddhist energy points, which are the four wheels that are turning in the body. Here, I'll go to the next. Let me go up here, Raven Song. Here we go. The cauldron of wisdom, is that what you're asking about? If you are a normal average person, your cauldron of wisdom is going to be born upside down. So you're not, that bright. You're not going to have those like natural bursts of inspiration. And so it's going to take the work of joys and sorrows to flip your one, which is going to help to flip the other one. They're all kind of connected, so that when you turn that middle one of motion, it's going to help you to start to get more and more inspired and to try to get that to go upright. But yes, if you are the cauldron of wisdom, if you're just an average person, is born upside down. And if you are a great poet or an inspired, I would extrapolate that out to, like, if you're a great artist or a great musician or something of that nature, is going to be, or great philosophical thinker, it's going to be born up fully upright and already ready to receive all of the wisdom from the gods. So this image here is I think an image, I always get lost of what I've given you and what I haven't, but I think you've got this image in your handout. So this is sort of the cosmology that the tokens are built out of. And I think most people, we talked already last week about the three realms. There's, again, many, many cultures that talk about the three realms, where you have the underworld, the middle world, and the upper world. For the Celtic mindset, it was definitely the sea, land, and sky. Really important. They swore their oaths on the three realms. They didn't really believe there was much of a difference between. So going into the underworld was just as normal as walking down to the town market. Like, it wasn't something that was that difficult to be able to do. It's just part of the world. So that's why you do get different cultures that relate to their ancestors more directly. They work directly with their ancestors. They leave offerings. They ask questions of their ancestors. Just because they're passed on doesn't mean that they can't gain insight, inspiration, and help from them. And same thing with the gods above, and in the work. Thank you, Sean Marie. I thought that I put this in there. So the concept of the three realms is, I think, one that most of us working certainly with any type of nature-based spiritual path or such would be aware of, and we talked about that last week. So if you look at the left-hand side, you see the sea, land, and sky, upper, middle, and lower worlds. You can see the cauldrons. The first term here is the cauldron of wisdom, the cauldron of motion, and the cauldron of warming. And these would go with the Norse wells of inspiration, the source well, and then the well of weird that you would see in Norse mythology. Now, again, most of the actual chakras, so if we look at these symbols as a chakra, if you're comfortable with working with chakra points, which I know a lot of people are, then you can just use these as the chakra points. You've got at the very base, you've got the grounding chakra, right? That's generally something that is associated with black, really dark colors, dark browns, blacks. I have a dark smoky quartz that I use there. So in that would be the very root if you're going to walk through chakras with it. But as we know, they were tended, as far as we can tell, mostly to be the 6 chakras. The 7th chakra of the crown is the one that's questionable in chakras. Again, I'm not an expert on chakras, but if you do use chakras, then you would just use these 1 through 7 and kind of work your way up. I think it's pretty easy to see, the throat chakra here for the voice of truth, the heart chakra. Serenity I used, which is in your guidebook, because it's really interesting if you look into the actual heart chakra. We kind of distill it down to just this idea of love, and it's actually a lot more. It's a lot more than that. Again, I'm not going to repeat the wheel. Definitely read that section there. But you can equate this, the third eye with intuition, the crown chakra with guidance. So if this is something that you are comfortable with working with, then bam, they're there. They're in place for you to be able to use them. But in terms of the 3 wells, we have the passion and the will, the first 2 or the second 2 because the grounding is the earth itself. So the very first energy point of grounding is the physical world. It's what the world tree or the tree of life is rooted into. It's what grounds us. It's what keeps us on the earth versus floating off into the upper realms, right? And then there are 2 points that go with each of the wells. So if you think about it, the first 2 points are passion and will. It's an idea of confidence, will, strength, the passion that is bouncing all around. Again, this is a figure from geomancy called Puer, and it's like the young teenage boy energy that's like bouncing off the walls. It's all of this energy that can fuel and drive the cauldron of warming. So those 2 are associated with the cauldron of warming. It's what's going to feed and fuel the rest of our body. Are we eating right? Are we exercising right? Are we harnessing all of that natural energy that we have within us? Or are we not eating well? Are we not exercising? All these types of things that's going to cause that cauldron to go over on its side, and that heat is no longer going to be being sent up the rest of the energy system. It's just being drained out. And so we're tired, we're drained, we're not feeling well, we're probably not inspired, right? We're probably not feeling that energy to get up and do something with ourselves, because physically and energetically we don't have that moving up the energy tree, so to speak. In the cauldron of motion, we have the heart and or serenity, and this idea of the voice, right? So you think about the joy, the great joys, the great sorrows, and how we communicate those. How are we speaking those outward? How are we speaking our truth? Those go in with the realm of motion. And again, this is just how I equate these, because it was interesting to see, because I already knew about the cauldrons and the way that energetically moves up and down within the body. And these points to me go really well within those, that what we do with, it's less, they talk about that all the time. It's what exactly is the great joy and what exactly is the sorrow is less important, as in what we're going to do with it. Is it something that we're going to allow to dump our cauldron upside down, so that we no longer have the will to live or the drive to live, or experience life fully, or get out and really see the sunshine, all those things that happen after, say, a great sorrow. For a time, your cauldron's going to be upside down. You're really not going to be paying attention. You don't really care about the rest of your world, the rest of your life. And some people stay there, right? You can stay there after great tragedies, and after difficult situations. People can just choose to stay that, not choose, but they never get out of that phase. Or do you use that to eventually drive your creativity, to eventually get yourself out there and realize life is short, and you're out there engaging and seeing the world again? That is a choice, what we do with the energy that we've been given, whether that's happy energy or that's negative energy. So those two that go and connect with the cauldron of motion. And then, of course, up at the top with the cauldron of wisdom, we have this intuition, which I really love these two up here, because technically the cauldron of wisdom is about, the gifts of the gods, right? That's the language that is in the things, is the gifts of the gods, which are great. But that also includes our own intuition, our own ability to see beyond what we see, trust our instincts, listen to our guts, all of those kinds of things. The high priestessy energy in tarot, right, where we're diving deep, the third eye, all those types of things. That's a source of wisdom, as well as the guidance that we can get from our higher conscious, the gods, spirits, however you see the higher realms. And so those two energies can fill up that cauldron at the top, which is then going to flow down and affect the way that we deal with joy and sorrow. It's going to affect the way that we speak and communicate our truth, the truths that we know to be so, and how we voice those. It's going to affect that. And as that pours down, that's also going to affect and give us the energy to assert our will and assert our passion. So the energy is moving up and down throughout the body, as we see with these here. So as we talked about last week, of each of these sets kind of asking us to orient, in some way they're orienting us. And so these figures are really looking at the internal energy. So you wouldn't read these if they come up in a reading so much to do with something that's happening externally. Although, of course, that external situation or event, it's more, how is that impacting our internal energy? So while you might get one of the elements, right, in a reading, some of the 4 elements, that is talking a lot more about the external elemental energy around us. Whereas these energy points are really talking about how in the reading is a situation or the question or whatever you're reading about, what is the effect that is having internally, and or what might we need to bring into bear internally, right? So you really want to orient these symbols when they come up in a reading with these internal energies. And so that's kind of the purpose of this set of energy points. and we'll, you know, we'll pull those out again, and hopefully some of those will come up as we do our test readings here. But the last set of tokens are then the interactions. How do we interact? So we talked about last week that the four elements, active and passive energy, all that kind of thing is that external energy. We think about the internal energy that's going on in the body, whether you're relating those to chakras or cauldrons or wheels or meridian points from the Cherokee, whatever you're going to relate those to, that internal network of energy that we have. So we have all this energy going out externally, energy happening internally. How can those energies start to collide and interact? Because as we probably talked, I think we probably talked about last week, the whole purpose of a casting system, such as OMs or runes, or even charm casting, and definitely the token casting, is that instead of having these neat piles where this is, you know, this is fire, this is air, this is water, this is earth, it's understanding that all of this energy is interacting. It's not just sitting there. We don't just have, okay, today I'm all about fire, I have creativity going on, I'm going to do stuff, I'm going to transform things. No, we also have earth energy. We have to eat, right? We have to fix food and eat our food. We have to go to work to pay our bills so that we can have a roof over our head. So there's earth things that are going on. We're having emotional reactions, which is water, right? We might be reacting in a more water energy way. Like those, we don't ever just deal with one energy that's just existing on its own. Energy is moving and shifting around us and in us, and it is interacting. And so the tokens that are about those interactions, on the surface, I think the key here is to understand that these symbols are not good or bad, or fortunate or unfortunate is a language in geomancy, light and shadow, these types of things. They really aren't one thing or another, because it completely depends on the situation. So we have the repel, where it's almost like a shield, right? So if you put up a shield, you repel energy that hits it, right? That can be a good thing, right? So if you're in a battle and you hold up your shield and a sword hits your shield, that shield and that repelling is a good thing, because you're repelling a sword from coming in and stabbing you. So that action of repelling something is something that is protective. It is something that is going to help you in that particular situation of a knight running at you with a sword. The same thing with disruption. Just think of that as a tower card in tarot, that everybody's like, oh goodness, it's the tower card. Lightning's happening, fire's happening, people are falling out of towers. That's not always a negative card. How often do we as readers get questions, or for ourselves or from other people, of, I'm feeling really stuck, like I just can't get moving, I really need to start some forward momentum, but I just feel like I'm stuck. Well, a shakeup, disruption or shakeup kind of symbol in that situation is good, because now we're starting to see that the energy in the situation is got the potential to shake up and break up that stagnancy, and so then it becomes a good thing. If, however, you're trying to find, say, a stable job, or you're trying to stabilize a relationship, and the shakeup card or symbol would just show up, then that's not so fortunate for the situation, because all of a sudden you're trying to have stability and the ground is shaking, and then that's not such a good thing. So individually, we don't want to look at these things, these tokens as coming up and saying, oh, that's a negative token. Think about the situation that you're reading and whether or not that is a good thing or a bad thing for the situation. Same thing even with the abdication. That is about giving away your power. That is would equate very much to the devil card. So the devil card in tarot is about abdicating your power. The devil made me do it. You're abdicating your responsibility for your own choices. You're giving away your power to a different situation, to another person or a situation. So when the devil card in tarot comes up, it's saying somehow you've given some of your power away. How are you going to get it back, right? How are you going to take some of that control of that power back? So the abdication symbol is the same sort of energy there. And sometimes that's good though, right? Sometimes we do need to let go of or get rid of a particular energy. And it doesn't mean that the energy is bad. It's just it's not helpful to you right now. So you just need to let go of that. So that symbol itself. Sean Marie, what would the repel? You know, I didn't have to, so those two were easy. The tower was easy. The devil's easy. What was the repel card? I would have to think about that. I don't know of a particular tarot card that, some degrees strength. The repel could, or even the blockage could even be strength in the older sense of fortitude, and sort of putting up that wall. Use that sense of strength that's going to put that there. I'm trying to think of like a protective, what would be a tarot card that would be to be Raven song. Yeah, Raven says the Five of Wands. That would, I would even think of the Five of Wands, maybe even more of the shake. That's usually fighting. So on the Five of Wands, you generally see a bunch of people who are fighting. The repel, what about the Seven of Wands? That would probably be repel, right? So you often see, yes, Chris, I think Chris said the same thing. That's where you see somebody that's usually up on top of a cliff, or somehow has a bit of the higher ground, and there's a whole bunch of other wands that are like trying to, he's holding the ground, he's holding that high point. So the card is about standing up to what's standing up for what's important to you, holding your ground. So in a positive sense, I think the repel would definitely, you could associate that with the Seven of Wands. That would definitely be the energy there. But it can also though be that you can sometimes, in a negative sense, sometimes if you're trying to invite energy in, but you have all these walls up, you're not willing. So let's say somebody is looking for love, right? So they say, okay, I really want to, I've had some really bad experiences, relationships, but I do want to have a good relationship. I want to find a relationship. Well, sometimes all of those bad experiences that we have, we put up all these like shields around ourselves, and we have all of these negative connotations, say about all men or all women because of bad experiences we have. We have all this stuff. And so that when somebody comes around that, you know, their energy might be, okay, this could work, we're just kind of repelling that off. All of these shields and these things that we've built up around ourselves is just repelling it. So that, in that case, repelling can be not so great of an energy. So it just depends. That's the importance of thinking about these 5 tokens, is to not automatically go to fortunate or unfortunate, or beneficent and maleficent. Is that how they say it with Hermetic things? Don't automatically go to the Tower card or the Devil card, these things as being negative. They're just giving an idea of how energy is interacting, and whether that is going to be helpful or not helpful to your situation depends entirely on the situation. So be willing to, again, as I want to keep that focus on, let the symbol root you, but then also let it catapult you away. Let you start to think beyond the instant reaction, oh, repelling is not good, to, okay, well, shielding is good, and shielding is a form of repelling. And blockages, you talk about putting up walls. Well, sometimes having walls and boundaries is very important. I don't personally want to go sleep out in the middle of the city and in the streets. Having 4 walls around me is something that I find to be very beneficial and has a degree of safety. So sometimes having healthy boundaries and healthy walls is an important part of interacting with energy and people and situations. Whereas sometimes we can have that energy bind us in, so that now we have become restricted. So take geomancy, there's a figure called Carcer, which literally looks like a binding in of energy, and you would think, oh, that's very claustrophobic, that's kind of putting yourself into a prison cell. So it looks really negative, and the inclination would be to say, oh, that's a bad thing, you're getting really restricted. Sometimes you're looking for that sense of security and stability in those four walls, and that can be really good for a situation. Same thing with the hidden or the unseen. That just means there's something below the surface we're not seeing. It doesn't mean it's something bad below the surface. It's not necessarily a secret that we're going to find out that's going to, ruin our world or our life. It just means that the way that energy is interacting isn't fully clear yet. And so that might mean, okay, dig a little deeper and figure out what is the energy going on beneath the surface. It can also be that I can't remember which old, there's a fortune telling card set. I can't remember, but I've seen some sets where there is a card that basically means you just can't know right now, right? Sometimes all of the things are not in play, all of the things aren't revealed, we don't know the whole situation, and so we just have to accept that sometimes, that all of the energy hasn't manifested itself as of yet, and there's a lot of unknowns that are going on. And so don't make any concrete decisions, don't make any bold moves yet, because you might not know what's happening. Mr. Jones, sunken treasure, yes, or can be a veil, it just depends. Yes, Sean Marie, I think it would very much correspond to Neptune. Chris says that token kept appearing this past week, reminds me of a cave. Yeah, it's that idea, the things that can be hidden. And so you want to be able to take, symbology is all about a very simple symbol, right? It's a little thing, there's a little dot with a little thing, and it's covered up, cups over the top of the candlelight. And so it's a simple symbol of something that is unseen or hidden. But it can also extrapolate depending on the lens of the question. And this is why any class that you take with me, whether it's tokens or runes or tarot or Lenormand, the importance of focusing your question when you're doing any kind of reading, because otherwise it can mean 100 different things, right? This idea of repelling or blocking or abdicating or hidden things can mean so many different things depending on how you focus that in. So having a question in mind, or having positions, having something to take what is so small but has the potential of being so broad, helps us to narrow the focus and allows you to interpret it in a way that's useful. Because you can just pull anything, out of the air and say anything you want to say about any symbol or card you pull out, that's not necessarily going to be useful to the situation. And so having a focus, even if the focus is, what do I need to know right now? Because some people are like, I don't always have a question. You do have a question. Like, there's always a question, even if the question is, what do I need to focus on? What is it that I need to hear? But just to throw cards down or tokens down or runes down and have no concept of what you are asking or what is the question out there, whether it's spoken or not, it's going to make it very hard to interpret those symbols without it just being gibberish. So you've got to have that focus there. So obviously they were for Chris, as that token kept showing up last week. There may have been a lot of things that weren't fully revealed, depending on what he was obviously reading for. But it didn't necessarily mean, oh, there's this great looming secret, like Mr. Jones said. Maybe it was there's treasure beneath there. It just hasn't fully surfaced yet. Maybe go start, a treasure hunt or something along that nature. But the key here again is to think about how the energy is interacting, and think about your situation or your question to determine whether or not that is helpful or not so helpful to your situation. Don't get locked into negative versus positive, blanket negative versus positive, but making sure that you think about that in terms of the situation or the question. That's going to help with those. Okay, so let me escape. Okay, we're doing good. We still have time to do some samples readings here. So let me escape. No, let me stop sharing. Okay, let me stop sharing here and move some stuff out of the way. So last week, in terms of casting, Because again, I'm trying to double duty these so that, again, you have the guidebook. I don't want to reinvent going through them all. But I do want to work with, we're going to do spreads. I know some people are going to say spreads are for me. I don't, casting's not for me. There's other people who are going to say casting or spreads in this system is not for me. I'm going to only go with casting. So I want to cover both of them. So the first 2 weeks, we're really focusing on casting because this is a system that was developed to be cast, right? This is meant to cast. But because of the shape and everything, they do work really well. I use both. I primarily cast, but I do love using them in spreads as well. But this coming week, we're going to expand out from the 3 or 4 tokens that you might have tried last week to the 9 tokens. So 9 tokens is more of like a full tarot. So if you're doing a tarot reading, the 3-card reading you're used to, right? A 9-card reading is looking closer to a full-on Celtic cross, which is I think 10 or 11. But it's like a full reading with a lot of energies at play. Again, any casting system that I read, Ohms, runes, not so much charm casting. I just grab a handful of charms. I don't count charms out, but I always read with 9. It's just a number. It's a number. The number 9 is about dynamic energy, and casting systems are all about working with dynamic energy, seeing the interplay, what's going to stack on top of each other, what's going to move. You just get a really good opportunity for a spread when you're casting with 9. So I almost always cast 9 of whatever it is that I'm casting. If I'm just trying to do something quick, then I'll grab 3, especially if it's a real focused question. If I'm just trying to get a quick succinct answer, then I can see grabbing those 3 and casting those can really work well. But I do want you to at least try a 9 token casting this week, and whether or not you choose to read just the ones that are face up, this is a way to ease yourself into full castings. And some people will really push for traditional runes. You never read the runes that are face down. I read everything that I cast. There are whatever number is in the system, in this case 45 symbols. If I pulled the 9 symbols out, for me those symbols came out for a reason, and I definitely want to see what they are and read them. That's the way I cast. But one of the easy ways to do a larger casting like 9, if you're uncomfortable, is to cast the 9 and just pay attention to the ones that are face up. That's going to reduce like your stress if you're stressed over casting 9. Then go ahead and peek maybe at the ones that are face down, but maybe putting your importance on the ones that are face up is kind of a way you could step into it. But for me, it's very similar to say a 9-card Lenormand. That's actually a fairly quick reading because it's giving you you're talking about probably 3 Lenormand cards to 1 tarot card in terms of a reading length. And I think it's similar. A 9-card token or rune reading can either be really, really in depth, like a Celtic cross, or you can just kind of get the key energy and the way the energy is moving and move through it really quickly. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a long reading because there are 9 tokens on, which we'll do. I'm going to move some things out of the way so I don't dump pop everywhere, and take my phone off hold. I'm going to spotlight that. If somebody could give me a thumbs up if they're seeing, yeah, thank you, Lloyd. I'm gonna move this over here. So I guess we'll start here with, let me grab my tokens that are not my big set. That's my little, I saw Mr. Jones, I saw on Instagram that you got a set of, I think, tiger's eye stones for your tokens. That was pretty awesome. I thought that was actually a good stone to pick because they almost look like wood grain on those. Yes. No, this tray is actually just a wood. Let me pull these back. This is the one that is, this is a 12 by 12. I really prefer, I have a slightly bigger tray that I think is a 14-inch by 14-inch. That's the one I prefer to cast on. It just, this fits a little bit better. This is meant to fit a piece of scrapbook paper, and there was like a hanger to hang it on the wall. So basically the idea was that a piece of scrapbook paper, and you would make a beautiful scrapbook spread or whatever and hang it on the wall as decorative. So I just took the hanger off. You can find these in like craft stores that sell craft scrapbook paper. So if it's a store, a lot of times, this one I think I got at Hobby Lobby. I'm pretty sure I got this at Hobby Lobby, but I have seen them at other stores that sell scrapbook paper. The other thing is there's a lot of frames right now at, if you have a Joann Fabrics or a Michaels or a Hobby Lobby or AC Moore. Chris is shaking his head to all. Chris lives in the boondocks apparently with no craft stores. You can find TJ Maxx, those types of things. Walmart actually, if you go in the arts, not art, decorative, like home decorations, where they have like pictures and things like that to hang on your walls. A lot right now are like pink, like there's a here, let me grab it. And these are important because otherwise your tokens probably fly everywhere. I'm going to pull this up. This is just scrapbook paper. So I showed this in a video, but I had already done it, so you couldn't actually see. So these are just pieces of scrapbook paper that I have layered to look like this. But underneath this is, look at, it's just a laundry. These are like something you'd hang in your laundry room. But instead of where before you would often see like an image, right? And then this, you wouldn't see the lip like this. It would be on the back part. Whereas nowadays, right now, you're seeing a lot of plaques and these types of pictures that are just on the bottom, and then you have the lip of the frame coming outwards. And these are perfect because you, again, can just cover this up. You could paint this. Or like I did, I just layered couple pieces of scrapbook paper to cover up that image. And this is like a 14 by, I'm guessing, a 14 by 14 square. And this is a great size to cast on. It gives a lot of movement flow. I've used this one for years. It's great. I've used it for charm casting because charm casting has the same problem of going flying off. Or I'm just a very vigorous caster or something, but they go flying off the sides. So yeah, look, and even I'll see if I can find something similar on Amazon to link to in the final video link that I send you, to see whether or not they have something similar if you don't have. Mr. Jones says IKEA has a frame called Ribba, R-I-B-B-A, that could be used as well. So maybe check that out if you have an IKEA, although if he doesn't have a Michaels, I don't know if you'll have an IKEA. Mr. Chris, but you can order those online. I know IKEA has online ordering. But yeah, the cloth, I don't use this. So if you're gonna use a casting cloth, I do not use a tray like this if I am casting on a cloth, which most of the time that's how I'm casting, because the fabric kind of produces some degree of friction. Yes, you'll still get some things that might fly off of it. If it goes entirely off the casting cloth, you just don't read it. Or you can pull it, and what I'll sometimes do is, let's say I did a casting and the thing went flying off over here, I'll put it to the edge, especially if I'm reading for a client, I'll put it to the edge where they can see that it, see it was in play, but we'll talk about the fact that that really went flying off, so that you could read that as being a lot of high energy that's kind of really pushing off of the situation, and use that as part of the reading, the fact that it does go flying, right? Some of the fact that things go flying is because you've got to get comfortable with your casting, right? So that you aren't like crap shooting really hard, and so it's going to go flying off. So kind of getting comfortable with your casting method will reduce the amount on a cloth of how much goes flying off of the cloth, because the cloth provides some friction. But if you're casting on like a table like this, the likelihood of it flying off is much higher because it's so smooth. And so then having a tray that has the edges, it becomes really important. And remember that you can take this, right? Something like this that can fit a piece of, because you can get so many beautiful, I have a whole box full of gorgeous scrapbook paper. Take, you know, a marker and put a line between, you know, just all you literally have to do is just a line and a line, and you've got your 4 squares. You can take a compass and make your circles. I think Chris had showed us something he drew on something. You know, you can easily draw that and have a casting surface. Bam, that is super cheap and a way to have a casting cloth. I don't even, these, you know, cloths aren't too bad. The cloth that I bought originally for runes, I think was like $23. This is in, I don't know, around 25 to 27, I guess, dollars. I don't know for this one, what he's selling this one at. But, you know, they're not too bad. And once you have them, obviously you can use them for runes, oghams, everything. So if you like cloths, the other thing is to get fabric paint. You can get fabric paint at any craft store and get a piece of fabric and, you know, use a pencil to kind of draw your lines and then take the fabric paint over the top of those lines. And there you go. If you're really good at sewing, put them on in, you know, draw a pencil on it and then sew with a darker thread over those lines. There's so many ways to DIY casting surface that it does not have to be, I'm going to move this back. It doesn't have to be expensive. But, you know, 9 times out of 10, when I'm reading anything that's cast, including my tokens, it's on a something, it's on this exact thing. Because I just think it's the perfect marriage between the tokens being able to freely, you know, go where they're going to go, but having some degree of structure in place, some degree of positions that helps to read the energy of the reading. So for me personally, but I'm also a spreads person. So in tarot or any other system, I tend to work with spreads. I enjoy the structure of the spread. So that's me. Somebody else might enjoy having zero structure whatsoever and just throw it all on there and let that go. So you kind of find your own rhythm as to what works for you. But for new casters, I'm going to reiterate, especially for this 9. Yes, we've already established Mr. Jones does not like randomness, so I would stick with casting. Or this, you may end up saying you want the spreads only, but try, Mr. Jones, try to cast 9 this week. You have to, yeah, as I always told my kids, they didn't have to eat everything, but they had to try it once. They couldn't say I hate green beans and never eat green beans. They had to at least eat them once before they could say they didn't like it. So, Mr. Jones, cast it once before you say, no, 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 it's not for me. So you might think that you would only use a 9 cards or 9 token, 9 symbols for a large reading, so like a larger question or a general reading, but you can use a 9 for a specific situation as well. So let's do, does anybody have a more specific question that they want to use for a sample reading? Chris is making faces. He's like, no, I don't want to get the hidden token again. He's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. The cloth is, it's a safety blanket. It is, I definitely agree, Mr. Jones, that if you're new to casting, I really do recommend using either the paper that I sent you or just drawing one out if you want it larger. This, I don't have, I'm really bad with like guesstimating size, but I think this whole cloth is 18 inches. So the actual, because I think his are normally larger, and I asked because I like, well, this is a 12 by 12 plus whatever, this is probably technically what, like 13 by 13 because of the lips maybe. So the casting part is about that. And this works really well for casting 9. This is what I cast 9 on. So if you get a piece of scrapbook paper that's 12 by 12, it would work perfectly fine for doing 9. Okay, thank you, Miss Osset, who gave me, what should I be aware of at this new moon in Gemini? So this is more general. She wants us to kind of know what she should be aware of right now. At some point, can you do a sample reading without, yes, I'll do that today, actually. I will do that. I'm going to do one with the spread and then one without the spread. I generally use without a spread when I just want to really see the flow. I want to see the flow of energy. I'm not really caring whether, because if you think about it, when you cast on this, you aren't looking so much to do with the flow, although I pay attention, because you're looking more chunks. What chunks are here? What chunks are here? What chunks are here? And you're breaking it up a little bit more. Whereas if you free cast it, that lets you really see the way, how are you going to follow the movement of the coins. So we're going to assume we have now named our feed bag position of grabbing your bag and shaking it up. So this one's going to be general but focused in on what she needs to be aware of for Miss Offset. And again, I tend to pull 3 at a time, because for me it would be obnoxious to have to pull one out at a time. Maybe that's my impatience. So there's 3. And what I do is I tend to, I feel for the 3. If I pull and it feels clunky and I don't have 3, that one I got 4, but it felt good. So then you just, okay, I've got 4, I've got 3, I need to get 2 more. The cloth is approximately 19 by 21 inches. Thanks. I think mine is smaller because I think I asked him for a smaller one. So I like 18 by 18 because of my space. Okay, going back to Miss Offset, let me grab the last 2. What does she need to be aware of? So 3, 6, 9. So once you have, I like that we have cycles, so some shifts and changes, paying attention to cycles. Now this is where it gets bad because I hit my phone. It's really hard to cast when you have something right over your head or right over your hands. You keep forgetting the part, pull them out then. So yeah, you definitely, I mean, if you're putting them out in a spread, you just pull them out and set them in the spread. But if you're going to cast them, it's a 2-part. You're getting the random. So the first part is getting the randomness. And then the second part is then casting to see where those energies are going to land. Pull this up a little bit. I'll center it again once I cast it. So with this, you want to toss. So now this is what I'm going to pull it back here. I'm going to pull this over, and this is what I do if I'm doing a reading for a client and it goes flying off, is that I pull it back to the cloth, just into the cloth. So I know where, like literally where it would have been. I pull it, so if it was up here, I would pull it just to the edge of the fire. I just pull it to the edge there, so that where that is there. Again, it happens a lot less when you're comfortable with it, when you're not in an awkward shaking or casting, if I'm in my regular space where I'm not worried about a phone being here, but they will fall off. And so you have to decide it's like jumpers in tarot. Everybody has to decide, what are you going to do with the jumper in tarot? Are you going to look at it, or are you not going to look at it? So the primary ways that this one was actually on the cloth, just on the edge. This one went off. So there are 2 things that you can do. You can choose to simply not read this. It's off of the table. It's off of the reading space. And so it's not energy that is in play at all. I am just one of those people that if there's something out, I want to see at least what it is. But I do take into the count that it's off of the table. So I might say to Miss Osset, this is the figure, and I'm just sticking my stone there for letting it was also face down. So again, you have 2 choices to signify. You can just turn it upside down so that line's at the top so that you know that was a figure that was face down. Or like me, I just happen to like to that visual really being clear and seeing that that was a figure that was face down. So this is an active, the symbol for the active energy. This is this, I know I'm totally out of the frame here, but I think all you can see is my hands anyway, so it doesn't matter. This is a symbol of active energy, right? This is really being an active participant in your own life. This is energy that's fully in motion. Now you can read two things, right? Because that flew off of the side of the table, you can take two things into the fact. That's really going to be active for Miss Osset as she's coming into. You can think of that as a high energy because you have the masculine yang high energy symbol that flew off of the table, right? So you can say, okay, energy is going to be really strong for you moving forward. So you're probably going to have to sort of rein that in and you know, be that chariot where you're really grabbing hold of the reins and not letting energy get away from you because that energy is going to be really high. So you could read it like that, or you could choose to say, which is how I tend to read it, energy's high, it's literally emotion has pulled it off of the table. Or you can simply say that is going to come into play, but it's not, it's just not fully here yet. It's off the table. It's not really in play or in, it's not interacting with the other energies around you. And how you do that is really going to be about, as I say, for every class, no matter the system, the key to working well with any system is figuring out what works for you and then doing it consistently. So you don't want to flip-flop every time and have it be something different, or you're going to get muddy readings. So if for you, when it flies off the table, you just never read it, then you never read it. That's just your rule of doing it, and you consistently apply that rule. If for you, like me, I do want to see it, and I want to see what that energy is, and I tend to interpret it as something that might be extra chaotic energy, so you need to kind of harness that in. You need to pull it back literally onto the table. If I consistently apply that, I'm going to get clean readings with it. Where you start to get muddy readings is when you flip-flop the way that you choose to read. Now, if you are new to casting or new to any system, try it out different ways. See what feels right for you. Same thing with reversals in tarot or jumpers in tarot. Try reading the jumpers, try reading it reverse, try and see what feels right for you, and then apply that in a consistent manner. So how you choose to do what you choose to do with those jumpers, it's also going to depend. If you are just reading on a tray and it totally jumps off the tray, you're probably not going to be able to associate it with fire, one of the systems. So then you might just bring that back onto the tray and again say, okay, there's some high energy surrounding this, but it's not linked up yet, or it's not connecting with everything else. Just try both things out and see what feels right to you. And again, the more comfortable you get with casting, the less often, the same thing with shuffling. When you're new to shuffling, jumpers are basically sloppy shuffling. Your hands are clumsy, and some people are just bad shufflers. And so they know if I drop a card, it's because I shuffled it badly. But if you get into a really comfortable rhythm with shuffling and you're a good shuffler and something jumps out, you can kind of tell the difference between, oh, I really just dropped a bunch of cards versus that's important. So that's what you're going to do with that. Again, with face down ones, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, including this one was face down. What you choose to do with that is up to you. Whatever you do, just do it consistently. If you are not going to read figures that are face down, then don't read them all of the time, so that you get this consistent rhythm in how you're reading. For me, the system of journey tokens is meant to read all 9 of them. The only reason that you wouldn't is if you cast all of them, and you should never, in my opinion, be casting 45 tokens, because that is just that's just playing 76 card pickup or 78 card pickup or 52 card pickup. So I just go through and I tend to get the energies out, stick a little thing. Mr. Jones, for you, I will throw them all on the table the last class, and then you can interpret all 45 of them. In that case, I would say just read the ones that are face up. So yes, we will try it and see what that mess looks like. So I'm just going through and putting the cards or the figures that have face down, flipping them upright so that we can see them, and putting the stone next to them to indicate that those were face down. So obviously what's going to get my notice, we talked about this last week, casting is about taking your eye where it's going to go, right? What is it that draws your attention first and running with that, trusting that. So that obviously what's going to get my attention is the fact that one of them flew completely off, right? And so I would definitely say to what I said before to Miss Offset, that there is probably going to be a high degree of energy that might get away from you. And so you really do need to assert a degree of kind of reining that in so that it doesn't drive you, so that you might not go into overwhelm with energy, but that you have the opportunity to sort of get yourself through, which is interesting that we have the grounding figure showing up in the realm of air, because that it really is that idea, and it was face down. Oh my goodness, I don't know what my upstairs person just did. I really believe they have weight machines or like exercise equipment up there, and they drop, I think, like dumbbells and stuff now. It's very annoying. Anyways, yes, exactly, Chris, but I think it was a drop and roll kind of thing, not a very successful weight. So I think it's interesting that the grounding here in the mind, so getting the mind grounded, it needs to be turned over, which means that you need to actively be getting your mind sort of in that space that there may be a lot of energy at play. And so not getting sort of prepared for that so that you don't get overwhelmed in this coming time. So that's interesting to me that flying off there as well as the grounding one showed up, I think is important to pay attention to, and where some of the grounding needs to take place would be in the head, in the mind area. So that those two, that the reason that I jumped from here to here is just because we're talking about energy that is sort of out and loose and bouncing around. And so my head is definitely going to look to, okay, well, this is a one that's about grounding and rooting. So that connection makes sense to my brain. So just trust that the more that you get used to working with any system, to trust your instinct to follow where you're going to go next. It's one of the beauties of casting, but it's one of the things that does make people stressful, because they want to know, here's 1, 2, 3, this is how I read it in this exact order. And so that can make people uncomfortable. But just roll wherever your brain's going to take it. So that's where my brain took those. Sean Marie says, what is the significance of most of the circles in the middle circle? For me, not a whole lot, because I went into this reading, and again, that's where you kind of decide how you're going to read. If you're going into the reading, again, all of these lines on this is to be, for me, the ultimate casting clause. So it has everything in play that I may want to use, but I don't use them all at the same time. So the only things that I went into the reading to focus on is I was going to be looking at the 4 elements, because I kind of want people staying there that are new to casting. So for me in this reading, I wouldn't pay a lot of significance to the fact that there's a lot right here in this ring. Now, if I was doing a reading using these 3 rings or these 3 rings here, then I would put a lot of weight on that symbol, what that was, and that would depend on what I was doing. So if I was doing soul, body, and mind, then there's a lot going on in the physical world. If I was doing body, mind, and spirit, then there's going to be a lot of energy going on in the mind. So it depends on how I would have. That's the importance of lining out to yourself. How are you going into this reading? What are you casting it as? What is the spread, basically? What are the positions that you're using, so that you don't then start to overread it by applying every single thing to it? Because then I would be applying directions. I'd be applying these 3 things. I'd be applying, and you can do that, but that's a big, more of a in-depth you know, true, I guess, Celtic cross, kind of where you're going every which way. But I think what can end up happening is you can end up getting really muddled, because you're going to get all these different things, and how are you going to do those? And you can, and we will definitely look at that, some of those things like that in the last class. It's similar to doing a 9-card reading where you can read past, present, future, body, mind, and spirit. You read your corners, you read your crosses. There's a lot of things that you can do, but that's not where you should go at the beginning of getting comfortable with the system. So in this particular reading, I don't pay any significance to these other than the fact that they're all in the realm of earth. So I'm not looking at this swing here of the circle. I'm looking at the fact that it's all in the earth, and some straddling obviously into fire and into water, but they're all touching earth. So again, that speaks to a lot of physical, that maybe a lot of this energy and shifts are going to be actually going on in the physical world, and B, that she needs to put a lot of her focus there, on the physicality of things. So it does look like a lot of grounding is needed, yes. So, see, I answered that. So for me, the significance is none about the ring. It's about more the fact that it's all in earth. So once I look at these two, the other one that I probably would look at is this one, because it didn't go off, but it did go close to the edge of this, and it is in the realm of earth. It was face down, and it is the symbol for the east. So remember, we talked about last week that the directional ones are orienting us in story, or orienting us in that sort of linear directions. And the east is about the rising sun. It's about new things that may be coming up in your physical world, and things that are, again, we saw highly energy that you might need to be keeping your hands on the reins or on the wheel on. And so really paying attention to, there's a lot of energy that may be in play, and there may be some new opportunities, which we might see more of here. But just here is talking about new things starting to open up in the time period. I can't remember now what time period she said. I think it was something to do with the moon. Right, in the new moon, which is also interesting, right? Because that's, again, that opportunity for new energy at play already with the new moon. So yeah, so there is an opportunity for new things in the physical world that you can be able to manifest. So I would pay attention to that because it flew off. So I've kind of taken care of those things. There's only one figure firmly into the realm of water, which is the emotion. And this is the repel that we just talked about. Now, because there's a lot, we've already seen that there's a lot of energy going on, because we've already seen that there is a need to probably ground the mind and sort of not let the mind be doing that crazy brain thing. Going down here with repel and having it face down, for me, that's probably more to do with shielding, more to do with, okay, emotionally, this may be a time to sort of set up some boundaries for emotions, that sort of set up that degree of, although you don't see, again, the only thing that we see touching into water is the cycles, right? And again, the fact that this is not straight up and down, I don't read those any differently. So whether this figure is this way or this way doesn't matter to me. It's whether or not it's face down or face up. That doesn't mean that you can't. That doesn't mean that there aren't ways that you can do that eventually, but I wouldn't pay attention to that, and I don't at all pay attention to the direction that they're shifted in. Yeah, so, but what's interesting, Sean Marie makes the point that the new moon is in Gemini, which is of course an air sign, but there's not a lot going on other than needing to root and ground in air. It's just like when you're reading astrology, an empty house does not mean empty energy, right? It doesn't mean nothing is happening. It can also be the opposite, right? That there is a lot of potential for something happening because you've got this wide open space in the mind. But the only thing in the mind is needing to sort of root and ground it, which tells me there could be a lot going on in the mind that just we need to really hone in and focus on focusing the mind and grounding the mind. So yeah, that's interesting there, Sean Marie. So this idea of shifts and changes between the physical world and the emotional world is on the border. We talked about last week, if things are on the line, pay attention to that, because we're actually seeing a connection, a physical connection between what's going on in her physical world and the way that she's emotionally feeling. And so that shifts and changes, but these are talking about cycles, right? This isn't a shake-up card. This isn't the tower type energy. These are cycles that happen as a continual basis that we should learn to move with and not fight against. But understanding that cycles and shifts and changes that happen in the physical world affects her emotions and vice versa. And so understanding, paying attention to those connections is going to be helpful for her. So we can look at that over there. Obviously, I'm always going to pay attention to the third row because that is a big symbol for me. It's one of the main symbols of the deck or the system, as we talked about with those first three, the web, the third row, and the third row and the crossroads. Those are sort of key symbols for in the system for me, because this is talking about taking that third row. It's about talking about rooting yourself into the energy, but then pushing yourself beyond, catapulting past that. And so whenever this shows up in a reading, I'm always paying attention to it. It was face down, so, and it's in the position of earth. So making some decisions in her physical world that maybe push her out of her comfort zone, or taking that third road. You have a choice to go this way or this way. What's a different way? What's a different way that you can take that isn't one of those? Can you create another path? Oh my goodness. Can you guys hear that? Or is it just, hopefully you guys cannot hear that. It's so loud. So yes, that's an important one. And so that's why I would tell her, Miss Asa, I would say, be watching for opportunities for not going left or right, but taking a totally different direction. And that needs to be activated. It was face down, so it may not be obvious, like, oh, okay, I've got to go this way, I've got to go this way, now I need to do this. It may not be obvious, but this time is a good opportunity energetically to forge a fresh road, push past what things are. And it's interesting that the Serenity card or the Heart card or symbol that is on top of that. So that sort of kind of rooting and grounding yourself in heart and following your heart versus the either or. I think it's interesting to see that there. But because we have fall, right? Fall conversely has, now this is another, I don't want to get into this too much because we're going to have a whole section on that next week about the seasons and how you might choose to read the seasons. But if you're just going to read this simply, this is the season of fall, which is, yes, the harvest, but it's also letting go. So part of making these new decisions and forging a new path is going to have pulling in the things that are worthwhile, that are going to feed and support what you want to do, and letting go of the things that are no longer supporting what you need to do. And so thinking about that fall energy as she pushes forward. Again, this is strike speed reading, which is probably not the best for a 9-figure, but the last figure that we have, turn it back upside down, is in the realm of fire. So we're going to talk about, I think this is next week too, because this is in the cycles. This, if you look at this little circle as being a birth chart, and you cut the birth chart into a pie, this is the quadrant of beginnings, the quadrant of development, at least the way that I learned them, the quadrant of achievements, and then the quadrant of maturity. So this is more the life cycle. It's that spark. The first one, if it's filled in on the first one, the second one is that childhood energy. It's that sort of going out and exploring the world and kind of developing your creative endeavors, developing some creative outlets, some things that she's passionate about, further developing those is what you would think of with it being here. If it's here, it's adulthood. It's adult. I'm so sorry, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if you've ever lived in an apartment, but sometimes you have to sit there and think, what could they possibly be doing to making these noises? So yes, if it was here, it's about maturity, and the last one is the achieving things at adult stage, And then the elder stage on the top is that idea of wisdom and kind of coming full circle and learning things. But because it's here, this is about development, exploring new passions, exploring things that she might want to shift or change in her world because of the transformative fire up here. So the things to learn, I think, from this are couplefold. Pick what you're going to focus on if you're going to cast on a cloth. So in this case, we've focused on the 4 elements. Don't try to do all of the above. Just pick your 4 elements or get a piece of paper, cut it in the square, and just pay attention to your squares. Decide what you're going to do with tokens that fall off, because you will have tokens that fall off or fly off or do all kinds of things off of the thing. Decide what you're going to be doing with that. Decide, obviously, what you're going to be doing with, if you're going to read face down or not read face down. And then allow yourself to jump around. There's no specific order that you have to do this in. Just follow the way that your brain leads you through the rest of the reading. And I would say if you're really new to casting, maybe have a specific question versus a general question, because sometimes it's easier if you're talking about, let's say, what should I be doing at work? There's a lens that you can really read it through that might help you to figure out how to interpret the symbols. I love general questions. I am a big fan of general readings because you're just like, maybe you don't know the right question to ask, but they can be a little bit daunting if you're completely new to something. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's casting 9 with, let me really quickly do a cast with no cloth. That way you can at least see that. But this case, let me grab, it will. So the difference with casting with nothing is you can still, generally, so I learned to cast with runes, and then I did a lot of casting with charm casting. And charm casting has a lot of movement. They scatter all over the place. And so I think that you still, it's not like a blank slate. Generally with casting, you're still looking like from past or present to future. Closest to you is generally seen as being more current, more relevant now. To farther away it gets from you, the farther the relevancy is out into the future. Some people do it this way. Some people do anything moving in this direction from past to future, like you would lay out cards very often in tarot or something that you would be casting in past or laying down past, present, future. So it's just, again, figuring out what works for you. But in terms of if you're going to, as we called it last week, crapshoot cast, then you're casting this way, so it makes more sense that you would be moving from in this direction versus going left to right. So generally, I think it's seen as present to future or past to future, going this way with casting. But you don't even have to put those, because maybe it's not a question of it's not a question that has to do with past, present, and future. And then you're just using the movement away from yourself as a way. I will literally start with the thing that's closest to me and kind of work my way to the thing that's furthest away. And it doesn't mean I'm reading past, present, and future, but it provides a structure as to how I'm going to read it. Did anybody else ask a quick question? More of maybe a specific question. So that free cast flow of energy. Yes, definitely, Mr. Chris. Oh, here we go. Lloyd did. I'm currently creating a website and would like to know the energy surrounding. Okay, so that's a specific. Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. So we're going to do the same thing. Feed bag. Get your hand in there. It's a big bag so that you can mix them. I think they might be fighting. I don't know. Mr. Lloyd, you might get some fighting energy in your reading, because that's all I can think of is they're wrestling or something. So mix, 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 mix. I got 2 good ones. All right, we got a handful here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need 2 more. Okay. So once you get them, again, you got to shake them up now. That's just the first step. I'm gonna scooch myself so that I can. Now you can also just do the same thing where you jump up and let them spread. So that's just, as we talked about last week, that's true. I'm just gonna, real quick, I'm not gonna use this as a reading, but you can just toss them like this and then just go about your business of reading them as you would. Just for me, generally, I'm gonna do that with a spread versus when I am free flowing, I do like to get, I just like to follow the flow that way. So I tend to cast in that direction a little bit more when I don't have a spread. But you can just find a way to cast and always cast it, other than the fact that if you're casting on a spreadsheet or a spread cloth, don't cast this way because everything is going to load up to the further end and you're going to kind of skew your reading because it's all going to go that way. Whoa, whoa. I don't even know where that one went. He really had a jumper. Or maybe it didn't come. Oh, there it is. It's like way under there, Lloyd. Let's see what's under my desk. Your fortunes are about to be told. What is going to be revealed? Oh, heart. Oops, I'm trying to show the wrong thing. The heart card is underneath it all. You got to put your passion into your website. You don't want one of those blah websites that people come to and they're just like, oh, meh, that's fine, but not so great. You want to put some energy into that and let it show your particular energy, which we know you have a lot of. So this is great because we actually do have a swoop. So we've got a swoop of things here. Now, again, if you're completely new, you could choose to just not read the face down things because that allows you to sort of narrow in the reading, and you might just read what's here and not go about the business of reading the ones that are face down. That's a personal preference that you're going to have to come to a decision. I cannot stand for there to be symbols and not see what they are because I pulled them out of the bag. I want to know what they are. And we started there, obviously. Underneath everything, he needs to have what he's excited. It needs to reflect whatever the topic is about, which I'm assuming is your business that you're trying to build up. You want your passion to show, otherwise people are just not going to be interested to stay. And obviously with websites, there's always that, they measure how many people came, but also how long did somebody stay is almost more important than whether or not somebody just clicked there. And why people stay is because you can see that energy and that passion there that causes you to stay. So that's underneath it all. But I'm going to definitely look here because I'm going to start here and we're basically going to go in a swoop here. I'm going to just, kind of click quickly, more Lenormand style, pull in a message because we have a very specific question. And so what's interesting is that we have the receptive energy in face down. So how I would read this, because of this heart and the passion that we just talked about kind of flying out and going literally underneath the whole situation, I would say this is good that it's face down. This isn't a time to be passive about it. This isn't a time to just kind of let things go the way that they're going to work out. You need to be really putting your energy into it and putting focus into it, pulling in that active yang energy. This is an energy that you want to be working with right now. This should be your focus, and it should be something that you're really active in pursuing versus just letting it unfold as may be. Now I love piles. So whether charms or whatever it is, I love it when we get piles like this because this is energy that is all interacting, as we were just talking about. Casting, the importance of casting is that you can see the way that things are interacting, not just that they're there, but what's touching what, right? So we've got a bit of a pile up with something at the bottom, and I'm going to see what that is. which is the full moon. So that's full manifestation energy, right? But right now it's not only face down, but it's got stuff piled on top of it. So you can literally start to unpack what you need to deal with so that you can pull out the full energy of what you want to accomplish with doing the website. So we have the winter, and winter is really about just sticking with one meaning for right now. Is this idea of reflection. It's clarity. It's having that idea of cold, crisp, clean air of clarity, really being clear. So yes, you want heart and passion, but what is the purpose of the website? Be clear about it. Have that clear in your mind. I used to build websites. Make yourself a map. Figure out exactly how you want things to look, how you want to have a clear plan before you go forward, so it's not muddled and messy and the structure's not weird. So we have that. We have the wisdom, or the elderly. This is that bringing in the wisdom here. You don't want the energy of this, depending, whatever the topic is, it wants to show what you have to offer. It wants to show what it is that you're trying to accomplish. It doesn't have to show everything. Being wise about what you choose to highlight on the website is going to help you to build a website that shows your passion. It's nice and clean and clear, and you're wisely choosing what you want. It's like that first impressions, right? This is what people are going to see and react to. And then here we have spring. The energy of spring, which is that sort of, can be a new beginnings for you. I know this is something we've read about, I think in another, if it's what I think it is, it's probably what we've read about. So this is a new opportunity for you. And so it would be easy to start to get messy and muddled because you're not sure what you're doing. And so all of these things are piled on this potential manifestation energy of the full moon. And so dealing with these energies is going to help you to fully manifest what you want to accomplish for yourself. So I love there to be piles. Pay attention to piles and think about what it means for the thing that's at the bottom of the stack to have the things that are on the top. And so as you pull these out and deal with those, it reveals, in this case, the full manifestation that he wants to have happen with what he's trying to accomplish. So, love the piles. Don't groan when you see piles. They're cool to have. So then moving forward, sorry, I'm really trying to be good and wrap this up, but still give you your message. We have the hidden card here, right? That there are ways, and I know Mr. Lloyd a little bit, and I've definitely done some readings for him. So this is that idea, so I can kind of see things a little bit more than out of the blue. But this is that idea that everything isn't fully manifested yet, right? There's still things there's threads that have to be pulled together, especially because we had this pile here, right? There's still some work to do for what you're trying to accomplish to come into that full fruition. And that's okay. It's the idea of, okay, right now you may not know how everything's going to turn out. You're not maybe going to know the end of things and exactly what's all going on and how it's going to work out. Focus on the things that you can do. And this stuff is going to reveal itself as it needs to. And then we have the development, this idea of the youthful energy. Just because you don't know this doesn't mean you can't enjoy the process. Again, heart underneath all of it, right? Enjoy the energy of that. Allow things to develop as they need to develop versus really trying to force it or get your shovel out and start to dig it up. Do the work and then let the things develop as it's going to take. That building a business, building a side thing, anything like that, it takes time, and it has to you do your work, and then it has to allow things to build. And then the last one is, again, that reflection card figure symbol that we had talked about earlier. This was, oops, I don't know if these two were not. So that's why I try to do it first, because otherwise I'll forget. I think it was just this one that was face down. Yeah, Lloyd's nodding. So this one is face down, which can be a good thing, right? And when we're talking about repelling, because a website we don't want to repel. We don't want somebody to click on a website and it repel them. He wants them to purchase what he wants to purchase or interact with him in the way that he wants to interact. And that is face down. So if you can see that message of him doing this type of work is going to we want to keep, in this case, that face down. So doing the work and putting that energy in is going to allow him to have a website that isn't going to make people to leave. So you can read it like that. And just, that's how I would choose to read it, given the flow of the reading that we just did. So you can see that you can really work through a 9-card reading fairly quickly, especially when you do have a succinct question like that, and get the key. And I tend to suggest that you do a quick little analysis like this, and then if you want to, I always take a picture of whatever reading I'm doing, and then you can sit and leave it out. If you've got the space to leave that out, then you can sit and come back to it and dig into it and start to pull a lot more out of it if you want. It's like Lenormand in that way, that you can do quick readings to get a message, and then you can really start to dive deep and unpack if it's a question warrants it. But not every question warrants sitting with a reading for an hour or two and digging every possible thing out. Sometimes you just need to get the message and then walk away. So that's kind of the beauty of all systems are symbol based, but the beauty of leaning into those symbols is it can be as grounded and succinct as you want, or it can catapult you into crazy mind bending, lots of layers issues as you need as well. But hopefully that gives you a little idea. If you're going to cast with a spread, pay attention to where things are landing, but still follow the flow of your mind. If you're going to cast like this, try to cast crap shooting style away from you as a way of try these out, as I guess, and then follow the flow of that's going to bring you that flow of the reading. If things end up, let me answer Miss Sean Ray real quick. Does the pile of tokens mean that it's a sticky slug? It depends, right? It can be. All of these things are weighting down this being able to manifest. So in a sense, yes, but I don't see this as more being sticky as much as these are things he needs to deal with in order to reveal, almost like, again, a treasure where we're pulling off the rocks to get, and now when we deal with those things that are on top, we reveal what's there. It can be, depending on the question. This was on a website development, so it's a pretty concrete, straight question. But if you're looking at maybe an emotional situation, then all that stuff piling can be really about weighted energy, that kind of stuff as well. So it just depends on the question, and depends on what are the tokens that show up, whether or not you'd read it that way. But it definitely weighs down what's underneath it. And so it gives you a order of, okay, first I've got to get a clear, I think it was kind of like, first I got to get a clear plan. I need to choose what I'm going to do wisely and be clear about what I'm trying to do, because this is going to start to open up the new opportunities that are then going to fully manifest with once he gets those in place. So it was a really cool little pile that you can unpack. So it really just depends on the question and what tokens show up, whether or not that's sticky or slug. But it can be. You'll see that a lot, where you get a pile up and you're like, okay, this is a tangle of energy that's got to be unpeeled and pulled apart so that we can really get at what's underneath it. It just depends on the question itself. That's a good question, though, Sean Marie. So your homework for this week is, if you haven't read the section on the tokens individually, read through the tokens, that section, so you have a nice grasp of those tokens that we were talking about this week. And then the other part is to try a 9. And I would recommend trying it on a spreadsheet. Again, is as simple as getting yourself a square piece of paper and drawing lines across it. You don't have to have anything fancy to do that. And have positions there, and then cast it in a free form way like this, and give both of those things a try this week. Next week, we're going to start talking a little bit more about spreads, so we can see how can we use these in spreads. And then the last week, we're going to pull in some dice playing, different ways we can play with the dice. We'll throw all of them on the table for Mr. Jones, kind of just play with different ways as we wrap up the rest of the tokens as well. So that's kind of the order of how things are going to go. If you don't have the next week, you'll need the Hive Tableau layout, which you probably got when you got the tokens, but if not, it will be in that link on the website where all the handouts are. So you'll definitely need that next week for the spreads as well. But I'll put that all in the message. So do I need to send you anything with the links? I was going to send you the link for reading the Cauldron of Posies text. I will add that extra, I'll just copy this stuff over and add that first front text about different energy point systems, because Chris had pointed out that that's not in your handout. So I'll just add an extra page on, and you can print that if you want to or not. Yeah, thank you, Chris. The pick with the crystal chakras. So I'll add that in there. I can't think, I think it's the only two things that I was really talking about adding in. So I will go ahead and do that. I look forward to seeing how you guys do with casting. Again, remember, don't just pull them, shake them. Mr. Chris and I think Mr. Jones forgetting to shake them up. That's the fun part, is the shaking and throwing. So make sure that you do that. And again, if you have any specific questions, make sure you email them with me, like with class questions at the top. That way I can try to make sure to not forget to address those in the beginning part of the next one. I think that's everything. I'm trying so hard to be good about timing. I'm a little over, but better than last week. Was a bit ridiculous. Okay, everyone. I will see you guys all next week. I know a lot of you do watch live chat. There's no live chat this week because tomorrow is the 24-hour tarot 24-hour tarot-thon that's going on at YouTube. So I think the first one starts at 5 in the morning Eastern. Yeah, Chris is saying 5. So the first one is at 5 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. I will not be seeing that one. But it goes for, then I guess it would go till 5 p.m. No. How does that go? He's holding up his fingers. Takes a full 20, so it goes to the next, yeah, till 5 in the morning the next day. So mine is at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the only one I know for sure. But so yeah, so there won't be live chat for that. So I will see some of you tomorrow, and I'll see a bunch of you next week then. And again, any questions, you get stuck. If you lay out and you're like, I have no clue what to do with this, take a picture of it and email it to me so I can see it and with what the question is, and we'll talk about it. So don't panic if you're working with 9, makes you get stuck, or say I have no clue what to do with this. Take a picture of it, send it to me, and we'll work through it. So I will see you guys all next week. I'm going to kick you out because the only way I can end it is to shove you all out of the meeting.